We have seen the properties of uniform continuity and some stronger versions of uniform continuity, namely Lipschitz continuity and contraction. In this part, we are going to see some applications of uniform continuity, Lipschitz continuity and contraction. One of the important applications of uniform continuity concerns the integrability of continuous functions on closed interval. So we proved the uniform continuity, which said that any continuous function from a compact subset K of a metric space X into a metric space is uniformly continuous. So we are going to prove an important result in the context of Riemann integration, which says that every continuous function f from closed interval a, b to R is Riemann integrable. So in this proof, we essentially use the uniform continuity of f. So let us recall what is Riemann integrable. Let f be a bounded function. Let f be a bounded function on closed interval AB, and let P be a partition. It's consisting of x0, x1, x2, etc., xn is a partition. So this partition divides the interval A to B into several subintervals. So x0 is nothing but A and xn is nothing but B. So this divides the entire interval AB into subintervals. In this subinterval, we are going to form two sums. One is called upper Riemann sum, which is LPF, which is nothing but sigma I is varying from 1 to n capital Mi times xi minus xi minus 1. What is capital Mi? Capital Mi is the supremum of f of x in the subinterval xi minus 1 to xi. In this subinterval, we take the maximum value of f. And remember, this f is a continuous function on this closed interval xi minus 1 to xi. Then infimum and supremum are at some points in the interval. Similarly, we define the lower sum LFP, which is sigma I is varying from 1 to n, small mi times xi minus xi minus xi minus 1. This sum is called lower Riemann sum. Supremum of LFP over all partition is less than or equal to infimum of UFP. So this supremum is called upper Riemann integral of f and infimum is called lower Riemann integral of f. If the upper and lower integrals are equal, then the common value is called Riemann integral of f on the interval, and we say that the function is Riemann integral. So for a given bounded function, if I want to prove the function is Riemann integrable, so for any given epsilon greater than 0, so if I am able to find the partition P such that the partition of the interval closed interval AB such that UPF minus LPF is less than f. So this proves that f is Riemann integral. So the theorem says, we are going to see the proof of the theorem. If f of x is a continuous function on closed and bounded interval AB, then f is Riemann integrable on closed interval AB. So in fact, this above result is true for piecewise continuous functions. So piecewise continuous function is the one not having more than finite number of jump discontinuities on closed interval AB. So let us see the proof of the theorem. What is given? We are given with a function f which is continuous on closed interval. So we need to claim this given function is Riemann integral. As this function f is continuous on AB, then we have seen by the uniform continuity theorem, this function is uniformly continuous on AB. So let us start with an epsilon. Let epsilon greater than 0 be given. So by the uniform continuity of f, so there exists delta greater than 0 such that modulus of f of x minus f of y is less than epsilon whenever x comma y in the closed interval a b and modulus of x minus y is less than delta. So we are going to form a partition which partitions a set the interval closed interval AB. So this partition we are going to consider regular partition. So regular partition means the length of each subinterval is same. So because we could have chosen any partition, so for in this case we could get a regular partition which will give the difference of the upper and lower sum is less than epsilon. So to get the difference of upper and lower sum is less than epsilon, we are going to apply the definition of uniform continuity of f. Not for epsilon, we are going to apply for epsilon by b minus a. So for this delta, we are going to choose an integer n naught such that, because delta is fixed, for the given epsilon we have got delta. So this particular delta is fixed. For that particular delta, we are getting a natural number n naught such that b minus a divided by n naught is less than delta. So this n naught says there are n naught subintervals. So this subintervals, from the subintervals we can construct the partition. So let us see the regular partition P. So starting from A, so the next point is nothing but add b minus a over n naught with a, you get next point. Similarly, you can go up to b. So totally you will be having n naught subintervals. So let us calculate the LFP, and the difference UFP minus LF, which is equal to sigma I is varying from 1 to n modulus of mi minus small mi into the length of the subinterval, which is nothing but b minus c divided by n. So as I told you, so this mi and small mi, capital Mi and small mi are infimum and supremum of f of x in the subinterval. And this infimum and supremum will be attained at some points in the subinterval xi minus 1 to xi. So for any points of x and y, so this, whenever this is true, this happens. So now we need to check the length of the interval. So if I choose my xi and xi minus 1, the entire length of the interval is less than delta, that is nothing but this. So what I am saying is modulus of xi minus 1 is b minus c divided by n naught, which is less than delta. Therefore, modulus of, if I choose any point in the interval this happens, modulus of f of xi minus f of xi minus 1 less than epsilon by b minus. Remember this xi and xi minus 1 are boundary points. So here we are going to take the supremum and infimum. So that quantity is less than epsilon. How is this possible? Because modulus of xi minus 1 is b minus e by n naught, which is less than delta. Now let us see the proof of the theorem. So we start with an epsilon. Let epsilon greater than 0 be given. So what is given? F is a continuous function on closed interval AB. So then F becomes a uniformly continuous function on AB. So we get a delta where x is a delta greater than 0 such that modulus of f of x minus f of y is less than epsilon whenever x, y are in the interval AB and modulus of x minus y is less than delta. So we are going to form a partition. Whenever the distance between x and y less than delta, so distance between f of x and f of y is less than epsilon. So we are going to apply the uniform continuity for epsilon by b minus a because we are going to construct a partition P. So then we get UFP minus LFP is less than epsilon. So how are we going to construct the partition? The partition is nothing but a regular partition. Regular partition means the subintervals, all subintervals are having same length. So this subinterval we are going to form by using delta. We are going to choose a natural number n0 such that b minus a divided by n0 is less than delta. So this tells there are n0 subintervals. So starting with the point A and add this b minus a by n0, I get the next point. So add b minus a by n0 with this point, I get the next point. Finally, I can reach a point because the total length of the interval is b minus a by n0. There are n0 subintervals. So this partition P, this regular partition P, we are going to see the difference between the upper and lower sum. So let us calculate the upper sum LPF, LFP minus UFP, which is sigma I is varying from 1 to n0, modulus of mi minus capital Mi minus small mi times the length of the interval, which is same, which is b minus a by n, which is b minus a by n. So here this mi, capital Mi and small mi are supremum and infimum of f of x over the interval. So these points are in the interval. But if you look at the difference between xi, the length of the interval, xi minus 1, so that is equal to b minus a by n0, that is less than delta. So if at all at some points maximum and minimums are at time whose difference is less than or equal to the length of the interval, which is already less than delta. Therefore, this capital Mi minus small mi, which is less than this quantity, because we apply uniform continuity of f, sigma I is varying from 1 to n0, which is b minus a divided by n0, which is epsilon by b minus a, this quantity, epsilon by b minus a times b minus a over n. So b minus a gets cancelled, epsilon comes out. So we have sigma I is 1, I varies from 1 to n0 inside 1 over n0. So this becomes epsilon. So this proves that UFP minus LFP, the lower sum, the lower sum, the difference is less than epsilon. So which proves that f is Riemann integral. And next we are going to see some results on continuous extension. And there are functions which have continuous extensions and some functions do not have. So we are going to see a characterization through uniform continuity. So we have seen this example f of x is equal to x sin 1 over x in the interval 0 to 1 over pi. This function is uniformly continuous and extends to a continuous function on the closed interval. So whereas the other function g of x is sin 1 over x, which does not extend to a continuous function on the closed interval, because the limit of g as x tends to 0 does not exist. So this theorem says the possibility of extending a continuous function to a closed interval a. A real valued function f on closed interval ab is uniformly continuous on open interval ab if and only if it can be extended to a continuous function g on closed interval a. So to prove this result, we recall two results. Let f be a real valued function whose domain is a subset of R, and f is continuous at a point a in the domain of f if and only for every sequence xn in domain of f minus a that converges to a, we have limit of f of xn is f of a. And another known result in sequence, if you have a convergent sequence, then every subsequence also converges and they converge to the same limit. So every subsequence of a convergent sequence converges and then converges to the same limit. So the proof is simple. So first, so we assume f can be extended to a continuous function. So f was extended to be continuous function on closed interval ab. So this extended function is denoted by g. Therefore, g is a continuous function on closed interval ab. So therefore, by uniform continuity theorem, g is uniformly continuous. So when g is uniformly continuous on any of its subset, the function must be uniformly continuous. Therefore, f is uniformly continuous on open interval ab. Suppose f is uniformly continuous on ab. So we need to extend this function to the closed interval ab by defining the extended function g on a and b. So we are going to give an idea how to define g at a. So similarly, you can define g at b. So here we make two claims. If Sn is any sequence in open interval ab converging to a, then f of Sn converges. Because this assertion 1 tells the limit exists. So the second one says if at all there are two sequences in the interval ab converging to a, then the limits of the images f of Sn and f of Tn are same. So this tells the map G, which is defined at A, if we take as the limit of f of An, then that map is well defined. Therefore, this G is defined at a point A. And from the theorem A, one can see easily the continuity of G follows. So here we want to prove 1. If you take Sn, already Sn is a sequence converging to A, then it is a Cauchy sequence. So we have a uniform continuity on open interval ab, therefore f of Sn is Cauchy sequence. And f is a real valued function, therefore this Cauchy sequence converges, f of Sn converges. So to prove the second part, we start with the two sequences, say Sn and Tn, if both are converging to A. So we construct a new sequence which is nothing but un. So by using the terms of Sn and Tn. So the new sequence is S1 T1, S2 T2, S3 T3 like this. So this sequence converges. So we have seen from the first assertion. Then once this sequence converges, then all of its subsequences are also converging. So the two subsequences are known. One is Sn, other than is Tn. Therefore, the limit of f of Sn and f of Tn are same. Now we see some exercises. You can solve them easily. I have given a proof of this exercise. You just complete it. So if you are given with a metric space and a point, so and the distance between any arbitrary point from the space to the fixed point x0 can be measured using the definition of infimum. So the map which goes from a point to the distance from the point to x0, so this map is Lipschitz continuous from x to y. One can verify easily. And similarly, this is instead of fixing x0, you can also fix a sequence. So now you can find the distance between xn and xn and take infimum. And if x goes to infimum of d of x comma xn, this map is also uniformly continuous. And next we are going to prove a useful criterion for uniform continuity, which simply says if you have a real valued function of real variable f from R to R, so the function is differentiable whose derivative is bounded, then f must be Lipschitz. So here we are going to see in a general form. So let f be a continuous function on an interval I. So this interval will be bounded or unbounded. I interior be the interval by removed the endpoints if they happen to be in the interval I. If this f is differentiable in the interior of I and the derivative of f prime is bounded in the interior of I, then f is Lipschitz continuous. So to prove this theorem, we are going to use the mean value theorem. So I choose any 2 points x and y in the interval I. So we are going to prove this function is Lipschitz. So given that the derivative of the function is bounded, so there is a bound m such that modulus of f dash of x less than or equal to m for all x. So 2 points are chosen x and y, say x is less than y. So let us calculate what is modulus of f of x minus f of x. So we are supposed to show this is less than or equal some constant times of modulus of x minus y. Now we are going to use the mean value theorem. So because x and y are in I, my f is a continuous function on the interval and it is differentiable in the interior set of I, then by using the mean value theorem for those points x and y, so there is a point z such that f dash of z, there is a point, there exists z in the interval x comma y such that f dash of z is f of y minus f of x divided by y minus x. So this comes from the mean value theorem. So now if I apply modulus of this, then this modulus of this is less than or equal to m, therefore this is less than or equal to m, so modulus of y comes this side, therefore what we have, modulus of f of x minus f of y is less than or equal to m times of modulus of x minus y. So m is the bound for the derivative of f. So this proves that f is Lipschitz. We know every Lipschitz function is uniformly continuous. And here there is an example. So in the beginning of the lecture, we have seen a function f of x is equal to 1 over x square. So here one can prove easily this function is uniformly continuous on closed A open infinity. So because this function becomes Lipschitz on closed A open infinity because the derivative of the function is bounded. Modulus of f dash of x is less than or equal to this, and this function is differentiable in the interval, therefore this function is Lipschitz. In functional analysis, you may be knowing the definition of boundedness. Suppose you take two non-linear spaces x and y. X and y are two norm spaces or non-linear spaces. And you have a map T from x to y. If T is linear, then continuity at one point will give continuity at every point. So this is the beauty of linearity. And you know the definition of boundedness. So the boundedness here means it takes bounded sets to bounded sets. So if I say a map T is bounded, so there exists k greater than 0 such that norm of P of x is less than or equal to k times norm of x for all x in x. And one can prove easily the boundedness and continuity are one and the same. And from this, the linearity of this, we have this as a norm of P of x minus y. T is linear. We have norm of Px minus norm of Py is less than or equal to k times norm of x minus y. This happens for all x and y in x. In other words, if you have a linear map between non-linear spaces, so you have a continuity at a point implies Lipschitz continuity on the entire set and the converse. So there is theorem 67 says, if you have a linear map between norm space x and y, T is continuous, and if and only if it is Lipschitz on the entire set x. Now we are going to see a very important theorem in analysis, one of the important theorems in analysis, which is called Banach-Contraction theorem. Because in application, sometimes you need to find the value of x which makes this relation is 0. If this happens, then x is called the root of g. So if I am not able to get an x which makes g of x is 0, so sometimes we will be using a trick to convert this equation into an equation of the form x equal to f of x or f of x equal x. By keeping nx one side, on the other side, you can do it in several ways. You could do it for a function. Sometimes you can have more than one f. So these two equations are equivalent because we have derived this equation from this. A root of this equation, a root of this function g, is nothing but a point which makes f of x is equal to x. So a point and its images are same, then those points are called fixed points. So a point x naught is said to be a fixed point of a function f from x to itself, because we are looking for the image in the same set. So this x naught must be there. So x to x, then this particular point is called a fixed point of f. It has many applications in different fields. So now we are going to see a theorem called Banach-Contraction theorem, which is very useful in the context of theory as well as applications, because it also tells how to find the particular fixed point. The statement goes like this: if x be a complete metric space and f is a contraction with a contraction constant k which lies strictly between 0 and 1, then this f has a unique fixed point p. So how to construct or how to get the fixed point f? You choose any arbitrary point x in x and construct the sequence fn of x, fn of x. This sequence will converge to the point p, and moreover we have that inequality that tells how many iterations or where to stop. If we are not able to reach the fixed point through iterations, so if you are happy with a certain error bound, so how many iterations are required or how many steps we need to reach the point. So that inequality is very much useful. So now we are going to see the proof of this Banach-Contraction theorem. So the proof has two parts. One is existence. So the second part is uniqueness. First we are going to prove that a fixed point exists. So what is given? F is a map from x to x, x to x, and x is complete. X is complete, and this completes contraction. So there exists a k greater than 0. There exists a k in the interval 0 to 1, such that d of f of x, f of y is less than or equal to k times of d of xy. This happens for all x and y in x. So first we choose any arbitrary point x naught in x. So we are going to construct a sequence from this. So how are we going to construct? The first element I am taking as f of x naught. The second element f of x naught. The image of f of x naught. I simply denote it by f square of x naught. The third element of the sequence, the third term, is f cube of x naught, etc. So this sequence is called the iterates of x given by f. So these are called iterates. So I don't need to write every time like this. So now I call this as x1, this as x2, this as x3, etc. So our first limit is this sequence will converge to some point. This sequence converges. So once this sequence converges, as we are in the complete space, so it is enough to say this sequence is Cauchy. So if I am able to show this sequence is Cauchy, then this sequence will converge to some element in the set X. Let us see how to give a proof. So now there are some observations from this inequality 1. So now the definition what we have taken as x1 as f of x naught, x2 as f square of x naught. So xn as fn of x naught, fn of x naught. The first observation, let us calculate distance between xl plus 1 and xl. What is the distance between xl plus? L plus 1 is any integer greater than or equal to 1. So let us calculate this. This is equal to, what is LL plus 1 is d of f of xl and f of xl minus 1. This is less than or equal to k times f of d of xl and xl minus 1. So this comes from the inequality 1. So if we go of xl plus 1 comma xl is less than or equal to k power l d of x1 comma x0. So this observation is helpful to show the sequence xn is Cauchy. So to prove this xn Cauchy, so we choose two integers m and n. So for assumption I take m is greater than n. So let us calculate d of x m xn. So remember this m is more than n, so I may write this as d of xn plus some p and xn. So this is less than or equal, by using triangle inequality, this is less than or equal to d of xn plus p and xn plus p minus 1 plus d of xn plus p minus 1 to xn plus p minus 2. We go like this, plus d of, we have xn and xn plus n plus 1. So the first we have seen in d of xn plus 1 and x. So that because the difference is 1. The next term. So xn plus p and xn plus p minus 1. They are the terms one after other. So this is less than or equal to alpha power n plus k power n plus p minus 1 plus k power n plus p minus 2 etc. plus k power n d of x1 comma x. D of x1 comma x. So this comes from this. We apply for every d. Every d. Because xl plus 1 comma d of xl plus 1 comma xl is k power l this. Similarly d of xn plus 1. So one term less. So one term less than this. And we have got for every term. This is less than or equal. So what is common? The common is d of x1 x0 and k power n is common. So if I take this k power n outside and d of x1 comma x0 outside, we have k power p minus 1, k power p minus 2 etc. plus 1. And this is a geometric progression. This is equal to k power n and d of x1 comma x0 and 1 minus k power p divided by 1 minus k. 1 minus k. So for any m and n, for large values of m and n, in other words for large values of n and p, so this k is a term inside interval 0 to 1. We know this k power n tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. So in this case for large values of n and p or large values of m and n, so this term is small enough. So this sequence, the entire term is converging to 0. Therefore we can make d of xn and xm is smaller. So this shows that the sequence xn is a Cauchy sequence. So as the given space x is complete, then we have proved this sequence is Cauchy. So then this sequence converges to some point. So let us say p. So our next claim is this p is a required fixed point. So this xn converges to p. What happens f? What is given? F is contraction. Every contraction is continuous. F is continuous. Then f of xn is converging to f of p. But what is f of xn? The next term. So which is xn plus 1 onwards. Xn plus 1. This xn plus 1 sequence. So by considering starting from the second value onwards, this sequence is also converging to x. So remember this is a subsequence of xn. And a sequence converges, all of its subsequences should converge to the same element. So therefore this p is same as f of p. Xn plus 1 is a subsequence of xn. Xn converges to p, but xn plus 1 converges to f of p. This is supposed to be p, therefore these two are exactly same. So p and f of p are same. Therefore p is the fixed point of this. So this proves the existence of a fixed point in the set x. So now we prove uniqueness. Suppose there are two fixed points, say p and q. Suppose f of p is p and f of q is q. Suppose there are two fixed points. So let us calculate the distance between p and q, which is equal to distance between f of p. So we calculate distance between p and q, which is equal to distance between f of p and f of q by using the contraction relation we have, which is less than or equal to k times of distance between p and q. Since k is less than 1, we have distance between P and Q, which is strictly less than distance between P and Q. Suppose P and Q are different, then we have an absurd relation. So distance between P and Q is strictly less than distance between P and Q. So this shows that the uniqueness of the fixed point P. In the theorem, you can see an inequality which is given the symbol star. This inequality shows, so if an epsilon error is allowed, if you are not able to reach the actual fixed point P, then we need to find a better iteration, better iterated value, say P prime of x, such that distance between P and P prime is less than epsilon. So we start with any arbitrary point x0 in x. So then this P prime is some fn of x0. We need to find this natural number n. So from the inequality, so we have distance between fn of x0 comma x0, which is less than or equal to k power n over 1 minus k times d of x0 comma f of x0. So x0 is the point, and if the error between the error of epsilon is allowed, so the distance between fn of x0 comma x0 is less than epsilon, then by using this inequality we have got k power n over 1 minus k times distance between x0 and f of x0 is less than epsilon. So here x0 is known, k is known, then we will be able to get the natural number n. By simple calculation, so you will get the natural number n. We choose your natural number which is greater than the relation log epsilon plus log of 1 minus k minus log d divided by log k, then your approximate epsilon approximate can be calculated by finding the natural number n. So there is a simple exercise at the end. You can verify easily, which is shown in the Banach contraction theorem. Here you can find the list of references. I have referred some textbooks. So all textbooks are excellent. So you should have a habit of buying textbooks and read. And these slides are available in the ResearchGate website. If you have any questions, you can write to me at the mail address. The mail address is sam@nitk.edu.in. Thank you, one and all.